Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aline, and I'm the Chief International Officer of Barcelona Health Hub. Welcome to this new episode of BHHSeries. BHHSeries are regular events that we have been organizing for a year now around digital health topics for and with our members and other relevant speakers from across the globe. So today, this episode is organized in collaboration with Asphalion, and we will discuss a very important and timely topic, the Medical Device Regulation, or MDR. So timely because the new application will come into place on May 26. So it was postponed a year because of the pandemic, but now it's closer than ever. So MDR is relevant for startups, medical device companies, pharma, hospitals. So you're not sure what MDR is and how it will affect you? So let me introduce our two speakers from Asphalion who will answer the question and many more during this episode. So we have Dominique Monferrer, she's Medical Device Director, and Talyta Carteano, Medical Device Manager. Welcome both. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Aline.
Thank you. So we'll now give the floor to Dominique. And remember, if you have questions, you can leave them in the chat, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Dominique, all yours.
So, it's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to explain a little bit what we think could be more relevant for all of you who are maybe now developing software as medical device and want to know a little bit more what this MDR will bring about in terms of challenges. But first of all, well, let me make a short forward in the title of this talk. We are focusing on the MDR because, as Aline said, it's the first regulation of the whole change in terms of legal framework happening in Europe around the medtech industry that will become applicable, which is, next May. So it's really around the corner now. So we are really focusing on this regulation, even though, as you will see, so software as medical device could either be medical device or IVD. And for this reason, we will actually talk and introduce concepts of both regulations, MDR and IVDR. So what we will focus on during this hour, it's a basic concepts, because let's keep our expectations not short but realistic. Regulation is quite a complex topic, and there's a lot going on in these two new regulations. But of course, we want to be able to answer the question whether or not this medical software is actually medical device, whether it qualifies as medical device or not, and if it does, whether it should be considered medical device software or IVD software, right? Then we should be also able to answer the question about its probable risk class, okay, so classification. And then we want to provide you a brief overview of this regulatory approval process. So what is it about? What are the main regulatory aspects that you will need to consider along development to reach this CE mark? And in terms of milestones, we want to focus on the GSPR. We will introduce this concept, this general safety and performance requirements concept, and aligned with this concept, what are the main milestones in terms of development for this CE certification, not forgetting about the quality management system that as developers and future manufacturers of medical device software, you will need to have defined and implemented in your organizations. So, okay, software as medical device could be either medical device software or IVD software. And this will depend on whether or not this software complies or meets the corresponding medical device or IVD definitions as laid down in the corresponding regulations. So let's see what is a medical device according to the MDR. So basically, a medical device can be anything: instrument, apparatus, appliances, implant reagents, materials, other articles, and including software, when they are used for medical purposes, but basically targeting human use. So when they are intended to be used for human use and have some kind of medical purpose, which is quite broad, as you can see on the slide, it includes diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, or alleviation of a disease, injury, or a handicap. It could also be intended for investigating, replacing, or modifying the anatomy of a physiological process, or they could also be intended to be used for the control of conception. So this medical use is quite broad. And let's see what is an in vitro diagnostic medical device according to the corresponding regulation. So again, any kind of product, from reagents to calibrators, control materials, specimen receptacles, related instruments, etc., and including software, when they are used for the examination of human specimens and provide information for a number of things or a number of uses, including concerning the physiological, so information concerning the physiological or pathological process or state, the congenital physical or mental impairment, the predisposition to a medical condition or disease, determining the safety and compatibility with potential recipients, predicting treatment responses or reactions, and including also the monitoring of therapeutic measures. So this diagnostic use is also, again, quite broad. So now we see that software as medical device can either be medical device or IVD. Sometimes it's quite straightforward, whether it's one case or the other, but sometimes it's not that straightforward, especially, and we are seeing this situation more and more, when the software actually processes input data, which can be hybrid in nature, or including or incorporating data that are or come from IVD data sources, but only partially, like, for instance, genetic sequencing or any other kind of molecular input data that can be combined with some clinical information or sociodemographic parameters that the processing algorithm then takes into account for providing the output. So when this happens, and as I say, this comes more and more often with technology advances, then basically the situation is that the developer and the future manufacturer needs to decide what of this input data weighs more in terms of criticality for the output. So if the developer decides that the IVD source component weighs more, then this software could be considered IVD software. And so this is a quite interesting concept, this weighting factor that the developer needs to apply. So as we can see, and as a summary, we can conclude that basically software as medical device will be qualified as medical device or in vitro diagnostic software when it has a clear medical intended purpose, when it performs some kind of action on the input data, including processing, analyzing, creating, or modifying this input medical information data, and when it provides an output for the benefit of individual patients. So all these conditions need to be fulfilled for the software to qualify as either medical device or IVD. And here we have some examples of software that would not qualify as medical device. For instance, imagine a picture archiving and communication system which only stores image data and displays it, but has no processing module whatsoever. That would not qualify as software as medical device. We have also, on the other hand, these electronic patient records that basically displays the paper files. They basically simply store clinical information data, but do not process any kind of information. Is not modifying this input data in any way. And we have other examples which qualify as medical device. For instance, another kind of packs, which in addition to this simple storage and display function, would also provide additional information about treatments, or would, for instance, process the input images by comparing the images with another kind of or set of images. So there's some additional processing functionality that makes this software as medical device. And we have also smartwatch apps on these examples of qualification, where they are sending alarms, like alarm notifications, for instance, for recognizing irregular heartbeats for the purpose of detecting or preventing cardiac problems, or detecting early arrhythmias or other clinical problems. So it clearly fits with the definition. So this was just a brief introduction for you to understand what is the focus of this talk. And now let's concentrate on the particulars of this regulatory approval process. And for this, I will let my colleague, Talyta Carteano, which is our expert in medical device software, guide you through this interesting process. And do not forget to type in any comments or doubts you may have on the chat of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominique, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I will try to show you in a summarized way the main points of the regulatory approval process in accordance with the medical device regulation and the in vitro diagnostical medical device regulation. So let's start with the qualification process. One of the most relevant input for the qualification of a product is the intended purpose that must be defined by the manufacturer. To be qualified as a medical device software, the product must have a medical purpose on its own. Also, the product must fulfill definition of software according to the Article 2 of the medical device regulation, or fulfill the definition of the in vitro diagnostical medical device according to the IVVR. As support in this process, you can use the MDCG 2019-11, that is a guidance on the qualification and classification of software in the regulation, both MDR and IVDR. So once you have your product qualified as medical device software or an in vitro medical device software, you will need to classify your product. Each medical device shall be classified as class 1, 2A, 2B, or class 3 in accordance with the MDR, or class A, B, C, or D in accordance with the IVDR. The classification of the product will consist, among other things, in the level of the risk generated by the use of this product. So you will need to think if the use of this product can cause, for example, death or deterioration of the patient's state of health, or can cause a surgical intervention, for example. Also, during the classification, Some other considerations must to be taken account, as, for example, if your software is independent of any other device, it shall be classified as its own right. However, if your software drives or inflates the use of other device, your software shall fall within the same class of this device. In the case of several rules apt to your product, the strictest rule should be the one used to classify and certify your product. At the end, if you are unsure about the classification of your product, or it's a too borderline product, you can always ask your health authority or a hand in the classification process. So we select some examples of product classification to help you to understand how a medical device software is classified under the medical device regulation. In this case, the product is an app intended to support conception by calculating the user fertility based on validated statistical algorithm. The user input basal body temperature and menstruation days to track and predict the ovulation. The fertility status of these of the current day is reflected by 3 indicators lights, so red, green, or yellow. In this case, this app should be classified as class 1 per rule 11. The second example is a medical device, including a software intended to be used to obtain readings of vital signals in a routine checkup, including monitoring at home. This product should be classified as a class 2A, since in accordance with the rule 11, as you can see, software intended to monitor physiological process is classified as class 2A. This example is a medical device, including a software that is intended to be used for processes in intensive or emergency care, as anesthesia, for example. In this case, the product should be classified as class 2B, since deterioration of a person's state of health can happen. Our last example is this medical device software that is intended to perform diagnosis by means of image analysis for making treatment decisions in patients with acute stroke. This product should be classified as class 3, since its use can clearly impact in the death or irreversible deterioration of patient state of health. So once we have our product qualified and classified, it's time to talk about the GSPR. The manufacturers must demonstrate conformity with the general safety and performance requirements. The GDPR's requirements are covered in Annex 1 of the Medical Device Regulation, as well the IVVR, with 3 chapters. The chapter 1, it's about general requirements. Chapter 2, regarding design and manufacturing. In chapter 3, requirements regarding the information supplied by the with the device, as for example, instructions for use and label. As we are talking about software here, we will skip to the software dedicated part. That is the chapter 2.17, electronic programmable system. This chapter determine, among other things, that you must ensure the repeatability, reliability, and performance are in line with their intended use in the point 17.1. The point 17.2 is about development lifecycle, risk management, including information security, verification and validation. The point 17.3 is about development and manufacturing in accordance with the state of art. And the point 17.4 about IT security measures. So you will have to address all those requirements in your technical documentation. And this takes us to your next talk. So before placing your product on the market, as a manufacturer, you need to produce the technical documentation, providing evidence as conformity with the applicable regulation. Since the technical documentation is often extensive, those documents are usually controlled by a quality management system. Also, the technical documentation must be updated as necessary during the lifetime of the product to ensure that this technical documentation reflects the current status, specification, and configuration of the software. The technical documentation is quite long and normally includes administrative information as address, location, name of the manufacturer, device description and the specifications, design and manufacturer information, GSPR checklist, risk analysis, device testing data, clinical evaluation, vigilance and post-market surveillance system, instructions for use, and labels. Also inside of the technical documentation is the software lifecycle process. The software lifecycle process should cover all activities from the product idea until the disinstallation. As software testing cannot prove the precision of the software, the errors as bugs and usability problems have to be avoided right from the beginning by following a software lifecycle process. All the software-related regulations, such as the IEC 62304, that is the Medical Device Software Lifecycle Processes Standard, request from the device manufacturer to follow a lifecycle process. However, they do not enforce a particular lifecycle model as the V model or the agile development process, and it is your responsibility as manufacturer to define and develop a life cycle model during the development of your device. So following with the technical documentation, as a medical device manufacturer, you must prepare a clinical evaluation or a performance evaluation if you are an IVD device for your product, just like other manufacturers. According to the MDCG 2021, the manufacturer must provide 3 pieces of evidence: scientific validity, technical analytical performance, and clinical performance. In providing evidence, the manufacturer should go through 5 different phases that are those one: planning, data collection, data evaluation, data analysis, and at the end, the documentation. Manufacturers must also actively and continuously monitor the safety and effectiveness and also the performance of the medical device software, even after placing the product on the market. So information collected may include, for example, complaints, directed end user feedback, or newly published research or guideline related to the product. Other technical documentation requirement is the risk assessment. The risk management process in medical device software is pretty challenging because a software cannot directly hurt or kill anyone. The damage is always done indirectly via a physical device or, for example, by people who treat patients incorrectly using the software or its users. The ISO 14971 is the harmonized standard for the application of risk management for medical device. This standard describes a risk management process to ensure that the risks are known, controlled, and acceptable when compared to the benefits. However, as this ISO 14971 has no explicit software risk management requirements or guidance, you should consider to use the IEC TR 80002 Part 1, that is a guidance on the application of the ISO 14971 applicable to medical device software. Another standard you must comply with when thinking about risk assessment for softwares is the IEC 62304. This one defines, for example, that if the hazard could arise from a failure of the software to behave as specified, the probability of such failure shall be assumed as 100%. So you always should use all those three standards together. Another requirement for the design of medical device is the usability, that resume user errors as hazard situation. This means that the usability process should be performed in parallel with the risk management process in accordance with the ISO 14971, together with the EN 62366, that is the application of usability engineering to medical device standards. You need to identify the characteristics for safety as in the risk management and identify the primary operating functions in your product, the user scenarios, and the possible errors. All those processes must be recorded in a usability plan, and the results recorded in a usability report. So basically, you will have always to consider the human factors, then how your device will be used, and the outcome if it is safe or not. Another important point in your technical documentation is cybersecurity. You should use the MDCG 2019-16, that is a guidance on cybersecurity for medical device, as help to comply with the MDR and IVVR requirements on state of art and information security. The good part of this guidance is that the methodology established in this document is aligned with the requirements of the IEC 62304 and the ISO 14971 that we just discussed. Basically, the security requirements need to be documented, developed, verified, and validated. Also, when we talk about cybersecurity, you need to keep an eye in the GDPR requirements, that is the General Data Protection Regulation, the Cybersecurity Act, and the NIS, that is the Directive concerning measures for high common level of security of network and information system across the Union. So if you were wondering why cybersecurity is important for a medical device software, here we have 4 examples of security attacks in healthcare. Basically, the FDA is warning that medical device can be very vulnerable to hacking. So after all, if you don't know how to document and control all the documentation you should generate to certify your product, the answer is a quality management system. A quality management system is a structured system of procedures and processes covering all aspects of design, manufacturing, supplier, risk management, etc., etc., etc. And almost all markets requires the implementation and maintenance of quality management system as a condition for the product registration. In Europe, the gold standard is the ISO 13485 medical device quality management system requirements for regulatory purpose. Is highly recommended the certification under the ISO 13485 before try to certificate your medical device. So, last but not least, we will talk about the conformity assessment procedure. This is the procedure you should choose if the classification of your product allows, of course. Is basically about how to document and control your quality management system and your technical documentation, and how your notified body will assess your documentation. If you have the option, you should discuss this point with your notified body. Here we have a table with the MDR, Conformity Assessment Procedure, and as well the IVVR Conformity Assessment Procedure. As we showed before, there's quite a lot of standards and guidance documents that may apply to your medical device software. This is not an exhaustive list, but can show the most known and common documents. Also, there are some standards and guidance we just talked about. You can find a more exhaustive list in our white paper. So we published this white paper about the European regulation environment of medical device software development. In this white paper, you will find more information about some of the topics we discussed today. This white paper is available in our website, and you can download it for free. And I will take this opportunity to show you our webinar agenda. you can see that we'll have in April MDR webinar about the drug device combinations with Dominique Monferrer. In May, we will have clinical evaluation and post-market clinical follow-up requirements under the MDR with Marta Rayo. Also in May, we will have another one about post-market surveillance requirements under the MDR with Sonia Lopez. So if you are interested, stay tuned in our website and social media for more information about those and more Asphalion events. And thank you very much for your attention. And we are open for your questions now.
Thank you very much, Talyta and Dominique. That was very, very interesting, very, very insightful. And now we have so many questions in the chat. So let's start. So first question, when a software intends to give recommendations to a doctor, is it also considered a medical device?
Yeah, yes, for sure. If these recommendations are of clinical nature, because of course could be recommending, I don't know, but we understand that these recommendations would be clinical in terms of patient management decisions. And yeah, if it's doing this kind of thing, if it's doing this kind of action, then it would for sure qualify.
Okay, perfect. So remember that if you have more questions, you can just drop them in the chat. So next question, what is the process to evaluate each feature of an app to check the corresponding medical regulation?
Yes, I'm not sure, but well, basically, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Let's try to see if this is what this person is asking. That software can integrate different features and modules, and these modules might be doing different things on this input data, and so eventually these modules could be independently assessed and independently CE marked, so that in a product version there could be like one module, and in another product version there could be like two or three in a different combination as in a third product version. So certification can be modular as long as these modules are independent of each other. So that could be possible if it makes sense from the intended purpose perspective.
Okay, so Chris, if that was not your question, you can tell us in the chat and explain your question or reformulate your question. So another question is about the few months that would follow the MDR. So we know that everybody is looking for the date, non 26th of May, but how do you look at the few months that will happen after MDR? Like, will it be any allowances for companies who are not ready, or is there going to be fine? Like just on 27th, it's not ready, so how do you?
Yes. Basically, the few months after MDR should not be a major anything in the sense the whole industry should have been preparing for quite some time now, meaning devices that were already on the market had to be, planned in terms of recertification depending on when the corresponding certificates would expire. So the medtech industry with products on the market draw, if they did things correctly, the action plan for MDR preparedness in advance, so that after 26th of May, there should not be such a crisis in what will happen after the date of application is that we will have less time for other acts that need to be implemented, like UDEMED. So MDR is not a full pack that becomes effective on the same day. There are some specific aspects of this regulation that will become applicable a little bit later. And one of them is, for instance, this UDEMED database, which is not ready yet. We only have one module accessible. So what will happen is we will look to the next milestone, which will probably be this pending modules of UDEMED. But there should not be a great crisis. Otherwise, that would be symptomatic of not having, prepared in advance.
Exactly. Plus, people are kind of 1 year, right? Because it was supposed to be last year, was postponed.
Exactly.
So give them an extra year. Yeah. Okay. So the next question. So the guidelines for classification are not very clear. What do you suggest to do if we have a software and we have doubts regarding if it should be considered class 1 or class 2?
So yes, the guidelines are relatively clear, and it's better than nothing. We have not we actually have not enough guidelines yet. So, but it's sometimes it's not helpful enough. Well, you should really look at your claims. You should really look at whether you could be less ambitious in a first product version that allows you to keep this risk classification as low as possible. So it's about this. Let me tell you that basically it will be in the list of the cases, software as medical device will be class 1. So as you can read from Rule 11, by default, all of them are class 2A or above. Of course, they can be class 1, but it will be, like the list of the cases. So be careful with the claims, be careful with your well, the clinical benefits that you intend to attribute to your product, basically. And in case of doubt, you should actually ask your competent authority.
Is that the intended use for the device? That what you
The
mean?
intended, yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
you could support in
this is it.
defining that properly.
Yeah, the intended use, the wording of the intended use, and to some extent to the claims.
Okay, perfect. So I've got a follow-up question on this, like a couple of follow-up questions on those guidelines. So again, we say you describe a lot of guidelines. How do we select the appropriate rule to adapt to our system?
Rules in terms of
I
classification.
suppose that, yeah, I suppose that he's talking about the classification rule. So again, it's about the intended use of your device. Try to figure it out, reviewing the classification guidance, and every time that you have a doubt about the classification, you should consider to ask to your competent authority.
Yes, in terms of rules, to make it a little bit simpler, but it will not be easy. But you have one rule basically that will apply to your software. If you are a medical device software, it's Rule 11. You have some senses. If it's IVD software, then it's a different thing, because it could basically be any risk class by any of the rules in IVVR. But in the IVVR, it's quite clear, because it's the intended purpose which is leading the risk class. And it's quite easy to follow the classification system of the IVVR. So I think that the doubts will come probably more on the MDR side of things, probably.
Okay, perfect. Juan Antonio, if that didn't answer your question, please, you can reformulate or explain more in the chat. So another follow-up question. Do you have any advice regarding claims we should include in our technical documentation, including intended use and or IFUs, to keep us in class 1 under MDR and avoid falling into class 2A?
It's another way of formulating the same question. It's not a black or white answer. We can, I heard once that to have this rule of thumb, or this reference idea, if you can claim that your software basically is like a digital calculator sort of thing, it's basically doing something, or a calculation, a very simple mathematical operation that you could do on a piece of paper, then you could eventually consider it class 1. But it will depend on the context, because that is okay for conception purposes, but it's actually not okay for when you don't want to conceive, because the guideline considers apps for conceiving and for not conceiving in a different risk class. But I was once told that this could be like an idea. If your software is so simple that it's basically doing some kind of calculation that you could do on a piece of paper, then eventually it's a class 1. But it won't be that easy to say do this or do that, and it will be kept under class 1. So
okay, perfect. So now there's a couple of questions about SMD. So I understand you established the same date for SMD as SMD for IFD, but for IFD devices, including software alone for IVD, is May 2022, not May 2021. Is that correct?
the two regulations will become applicable in sequential years. So now this year is MDR, next year is IVVR. I was not clear enough in the forward. So this is why we were focusing on MDR in the title, because this is the first one that will become applicable and displays the directive. And 1 year later, it's the IVDR due. So up to today, there is no foreseen delay for the IVDR whatsoever. It's not foreseen that it will become delayed. So this is how it looks like today, basically. Let's see.
And so a following question on that, also on the SMD, what are the updates regarding clinical evidence for SMD? Is it compulsory to go through a clinical trial? Can you avoid it somehow?
That's a very good question. It's not compulsory unless you are class 3, because if you are talking of medical device software, it's like this, that if your device is in the highest risk class, then you really need to perform some kind of clinical investigation. But it's not black or white again. So you really need to think of these 3 elements: the scientific validity of the processing that is taking place, how well associated is this input data with this output data in the corresponding clinical context, whether this is well established, that basically comes from publications, from proof of concept studies, or it's so well established that you do not need to refer to own proof of concept studies. So it depends on the analyte, the digital analyte, or the processing that is taking place. The technical performance is it's a technical validation, and then when it comes about clinical evaluation or performance evaluation, it will depend. It will depend on the situation. We need to assume that we are talking of technologies, innovative technologies. It's quite probable that we will not be able to claim well-established technology in the state of the art. So it's quite probable that own clinical data will be required in most of the cases, even for class 2A, even why not for a class 1? There's nowhere written that for a class 1 medical device, you should never, or you would never be, because you need to draft this clinical evaluation plan and report regardless of the risk class. But from class 1 above, so above class 1, so whatever medical device whose certification will depend on a notified body could be susceptible of being requested of having conducted clinical investigations. And it's quite probable that in most of the cases, clinical investigations will be needed. So it's more a question about how extensive should this clinical investigation or clinical development plan be, whether it would be enough with 10 or 20 patients, or you will really need to set up an RCT study. That depends on the device.
And so when we talk about clinical trials, like, does it matter the country where you do it? Should you do it the country where you want to sell your product? Does it make a difference?
In Europe, not. I mean, not in Europe. So we are focusing today on European regulations, and it would not matter, assuming that there will not be big difference in terms of clinical practice from one country to another. It could be important eventually for market access, for reimbursement, and that is another question that is even beyond regulatory. That could be important for you to choose some countries or to incorporate some hospitals in your plan, but not from a regulatory perspective, strictly speaking.
Perfect. So another question is, so what is changing with the new European law on May 26th, so what we've been talking about? Will it impact more medical device manufacturers, or is it maybe a change in detail in regulation that was already in place?
About regulate, so we always say that the MDR has not reinvented anything. There are some particular differences like UDMED or the UDI, which are clearly new things in terms of their deployment. But in general terms, it's more or less like the best practice becoming enforceable law. So the MDR is very long because it was defining in more detail aspects that were already in the directives, but they have become explained in more detail, and they have become enforceable requirements, whereas before under the directives regime they were best practices. But some particular aspects are clearly new and dramatically impacting, like the whole new classification system of the IVVR. That is clearly a big impact, of course. So partially yes and partially not. So it depends on the particular aspect of the regulations. Some of them impact a lot, and some of them also impact a lot, but they are not new in essence. I don't know, Talyta, if you want to add something.
Yes, no, I totally agree. There's some details that can address more exigencies for some points, but that's not a huge difference between the old directive.
Okay, perfect. So let's go to the next question. So if an algorithm will be added as a plugin for a certified solution, should it also be considered as medical device independently, or the solution has to be certified again?
Can you repeat that question again, or if you got it? I guess I should.
It depends. Depends
Okay.
because it depends of the intended use of this product. Of course, if this new solution will change, for example, how this product, this certified product is function. Of course, you will have to recertify the product, and if this software has its own intended use, you will have to certify the product as on its own. So it depends on the intended use. It's hard to say yes or no in this case.
Okay, perfect. And one more question is about MDD. So I've been talking to several startups lately, and it was not clear the difference between MDD and MDR. And apparently MDD you can do it yourself. It was not clear, like if you, apparently you should do it before May 26th. But is MDR replacing MDD? Where can you do MDD? If you can give some information about that, would be great.
Mm-hmm. Go for that one, Talyta, if you want.
Okay, so the MDD is we call the old directive. Is the directive that came before the MDR. The MDR is the medical device regulation that came for replace the MDD. Is, as Dominique said in the presentation, the MDR were published in 2017, I think. It's right? The 2017, and is fully applicable in May this year. It's true that some devices, especially with software, there's a high classification in the MDR, and this calls that you will need a notified body, and it's true that you have to work more in all the technical documentation.
Okay.
And there's one thing that it's true that some manufacturers planned this transition in advance, because there's a grace period for devices that will become up classified with the new regulation, whereby they have some time to go after the date of application, without having to immediately recertify their devices with a notified body under these new medical device regulations. So software was one of these products. Well, time is clock is ticking, and it's quite short now to really undertake this kind of strategy. But if you have everything ready, sorry, you could eventually still try to auto-certify your medical device software as a class 1 under the medical device directive, even though this is really now very, very short timeline. This was a strategy, basically.
Can you tell a bit more about the requirements? Like if someone wanted to do MDD now before May 26, like what is required? Is it the same as MDR?
No, not exactly the same. It's you can go a little bit more superficially through basically most of the same requirements, if I can say it this way. So you have to compile a technical document that aligns with the MDD. So you will have the corresponding essential requirements checklist instead of the GSPR checklist. You still need to have a risk assessment. You should have a clinical evaluation, but well, nobody will go come and check. You should basically do everything, but well, you can go in less detail or less deeply into it, because there won't be a notified body reviewing your documentation. Of course, you should have it, and the documentation should be fine, because as a manufacturer of a class 1, you should keep your documentation available and provided to any authority upon request. That could happen anytime, basically because you will have to register your device, and if the company is based in Spain, there's an additional requirement with this, which is the operating license, licencia previa. And for this operating license, you need to provide documentation regarding your quality management system, your facilities, and your products. So, well, you should have it done under MDD requirements, and even though it's a little bit more superficially or less in depth, well, you still need to do a lot of documentation, and it's quite short now to undertake this process. But well, it's probably still a possibility for some who have been working systematically and documenting everything.
And all this should be done before May 26th this year.
Before this date, 26th, with a declaration of conformity signed before this date, and this is only valid for the version that will be named in this declaration of conformity. So talking of software with frequent updates and changes in version, that grace period will not be as long as for other kind of products. It will only last until there's some major change in the software that will then require this certification with a notified body.
Okay. So we have a follow-up question on that. Someone is asking, so what do I have to do to apply for MDD before 26th of May? It's self-certification. So is that on a website, or do they need to talk to you, or how does it work?
Well, we can help, but you're not applying for auto-certification. You do it yourself. It's self-certification if it's class 1, because this is the only that it would only make sense for a class 1 medical device software. I mean, of course, you have some more time for IVD software, which would be under self-certification considerations, which is not class 1. It's a different thing under the IVDD. However, IVDD is not foreseeing any grace period, so that is quite important to keep in mind. The grace period only exists nowadays, talking as of today, under MDR terms. So you want to apply for auto certification under MDD. You do it yourself. If you need help, we can help. We can advise. For IVDR, however, I think this is quite important to keep in mind that as of today, IVD software that would classify as self-certifiable under IVDD, it's not foreseen that there will be any grace period for this kind of product. So you should be basically already applying for a C certification under IVVR with a notified body to be on time.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we came now to the end of the session. So if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to talk to Dominique, Talyta, and the Asphalion team to answer all your questions. Dominique, Talyta, I don't know if you want to say like a final word, like a conclusion of the session today.
Just thank you very much for your time. It was great to be here.
Yes, same way. Very happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for your time. It was really a pleasure to have you here today, and thank you for a very insightful presentation. I think very, very useful for the companies, a very important topic that they need to take into consideration. So the session is being recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channel after that session, so you can replay it. And again, like, don't hesitate to reach out to Asphalion if you have any more questions. So now, what's next with the BHHSeries and Barcelona Health Hub? So tomorrow, we have an event at 12 p.m. CET, so Barcelona time, where we will present or launch officially the 5G Design Lab. So I don't know if you've seen in the news, but we announced last week that Barcelona Health Hub, in collaboration with other entities, are launching Barcelona Health Hub 5G Design Lab, so a space inside Barcelona Health Hub. So now Barcelona Health Hub has 5G all over. So if you want to come with your phone, like please feel free. So tomorrow we're gonna present what is that lab, what we'll be doing, and why it matters to you, what's important to you, what you could do. So next event, April 15th, it's our annual BHH Summit Ibero-America. So that's half a day in Spanish, focus on the Spanish-speaking countries and how to strengthen the links between the Spanish-speaking countries and how to increase business opportunities. And the next BHHSeries will take place on the 28th of April, and we will talk about hospital processes efficiency in the operating room together with B-Brand. So you can find information about all those events on our website, barcelonahealthhub.com, in next events sessions. So thank you very much for being here with us tonight, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.